Marcus Blackwood leaned against the viewport of his ship, the Wanderlust, watching the neon lights of Port Haven's underground market flicker through the artificial rain. His weathered face reflected in the glass, dark eyes scanning the crowds below. 10 years of running illegal salvage missions hadn't made him rich, but they'd kept him alive and free from the corporate alliance's grip. The message that brought him here was simple: rare cargo. High risk. Higher reward. From his old contact Raven, it was enough to pique his interest. The port's lower levels reeked of processed air and desperation, a familiar smell to anyone who lived on the fringes of civilized space. Marcus made his way through narrow corridors, past vendors selling everything from synthetic organs to counterfeit navigation chips. His hand never strayed far from the pulse pistol at his hip. In this part of space, trust was a luxury few could afford. Raven waited in a dimly lit corner of the Rusty Anchor, a bar favored by those who preferred to conduct business away from prying eyes. Her cybernetic eye glowed faintly as she tracked his approach. "You're late," she said, pushing a drink toward him. "Traffic was hell," Marcus replied, settling into the booth. "What's this cargo that's worth dragging me to this cesspit?" Raven's organic eye narrowed. "Ever heard of the Zenithians?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. Everyone knew about the Zenithians, warriors from a civilization that had achieved near-perfect genetic engineering. Their enhanced strength and intelligence made them formidable allies or deadly enemies. "What about them?" "There's one being held 3 levels down. Captured during the Battle of Proxima. She's being sold to the highest bidder tonight." Marcus cursed under his breath. "Slave trading? That's not my game, Raven." "This is different," Raven leaned forward. "She's a commander, Marcus. The things she knows about Zenithian technology could set us up for life. But more importantly..." She paused, tapping her cybernetic finger on the table. "She doesn't deserve what they're planning for her." Marcus studied his drink. He'd seen enough war to know what happened to valuable prisoners. "How much?" 200,000 credits. "I can front half." It would clean him out, but something in Raven's voice made him pause. She wasn't telling him everything, but she'd never steered him wrong before. The auction block was hidden behind holographic walls designed to fool port security. Marcus counted 30 buyers, mostly corporate agents and private collectors. The Zenithian woman stood on the platform, her silver-scaled skin dulled by captivity but her bearing unchanged. Despite the neural restraints, her golden eyes blazed with defiance. "Witness this rare specimen," the auctioneer's voice oozed false warmth. "A purebred Zenithian warrior, perfectly preserved. Bidding starts at 50,000 credits." Marcus watched as the price climbed. The Zenithian's eyes swept the crowd, and for a moment, they locked with his. He saw no fear there, only a burning intelligence and determination. 200,000, Marcus called out, his voice steady despite his pounding heart. The crowd turned to stare. The auctioneer's smile widened. "Sold, to the gentleman in the back." The transaction was quick and dirty, like everything else in Port Haven. As the neural restraints were deactivated, the Zenithian warrior straightened to her full height, nearly 7 feet of lethal grace. "I am Naira Valthrax," she said, her voice carrying the musical accent of her people. "And if you think I am your property, I will prove you wrong in ways that will haunt your dreams." Marcus held up his hands. "I'm Marcus Blackwood. And I'm not looking for property, I'm offering a partnership. My ship is docked in Bay 7. You're free to walk away, but if you want revenge on the people who put you here, I'm willing to help." Naira studied him, her golden eyes unblinking. "Why would you help me?" "Because I've spent too long watching the strong prey on the weak. Maybe it's time to change the game." A commotion at the entrance cut their conversation short. Corporate security forces were flooding in, their weapons drawn. "Time to choose," Marcus said, drawing his pulse pistol. "Stay or go." Naira's answer came in the form of a lightning-fast move that disarmed the nearest guard. Lead the way, Marcus Blackwood. Let us see if your actions match your words. Together, they fought their way out of the auction house, Marcus's precision shooting complementing Naira's devastating close combat abilities. They reached the Wanderlust just as Port Haven's security systems began wailing, and Marcus had never been happier to hear his ship's engines roar to life. As they broke atmosphere, Naira stood at the viewport, watching Port Haven shrink beneath them. You have given me back my freedom, she said quietly. Now we shall see what price that freedom demands. Marcus set the coordinates for deep space, knowing that their journey was just beginning. The Wanderlust carried them into the darkness, leaving behind a wake of chaos and the first threads of a partnership that would change both their lives forever. Trust among stars. The Wanderlust drifted through the asteroid field of the Helios belt, its engines running silent. 3 days had passed since the escape from Port Haven, and the tension aboard the small ship was thick enough to cut with a laser blade. Naira sat in the co-pilot's seat, her golden eyes fixed on the scanner display. Her silver-scaled skin caught the dim light of the cockpit, creating shifting patterns that Marcus found both beautiful and unsettling. She had spent most of their time together studying the ship's systems with an intensity that suggested she was memorizing every detail. Corporate Patrol, she announced, her voice carrying that distinctive Zenithian harmonics. 3 ships, bearing 270. Marcus nodded, his hands hovering over the controls. They're still looking for us. Must really want you back. They want what I know, Naira corrected him. Zenithian military codes, defense protocols, biological enhancement formulas. She turned to face him. Which makes me wonder why you haven't asked about any of it. Not my business, Marcus replied, adjusting their course slightly to keep them hidden in the asteroid's shadow. Besides, I've found that knowing too much can be hazardous to your health. A faint smile touched Naira's lips. A surprisingly wise attitude for a human. Their conversation was interrupted by a proximity alarm. A massive asteroid was shifting course, heading straight for them. Marcus grabbed the controls, but Naira's hand shot out, stopping him. Wait, she said, her eyes narrowing. That's not natural movement. The asteroid's surface suddenly shimmered, revealing the metallic hull of a camouflaged ship. Before Marcus could react, their communications system crackled to life. Wanderlust, this is the freelance vessel Shadow Dawn. Stand down and prepare for boarding. The voice was female, carrying an edge of authority. Marcus reached for the weapons controls, but Naira stopped him again. I know that voice, she said. Thura Voss. She was my second in command before the Battle of Proxima. Friend or foe? Both, potentially. Naira's expression was unreadable. She's a survivor, like me. The Shadow Dawn's weapons remained locked on them, leaving little choice. Marcus initiated docking procedures, keeping one hand near his pulse pistol. As the airlock cycled, Naira stood ready, her enhanced muscles coiled for action. Thura Voss entered the Wanderlust's cabin like a storm-given form. She was shorter than Naira but carried the same deadly grace, her skin a darker shade of silver and her eyes a fierce amber. 2 armed humans flanked her, their weapons trained on Marcus. Commander, Thura said, inclining her head slightly toward Naira. When we heard about Port Haven, I hoped it might be you. Lieutenant, Naira responded, her tone neutral. You seem to have found interesting company. Thura's smile was sharp. As have you. We've been tracking corporate movements, hitting their supply lines, gathering intelligence. There's a resistance forming, Commander. We need you. Marcus watched the exchange silently, noting the complex emotions playing across Naira's face. This was the moment of truth. Would she choose her own people over their newfound partnership? The resistance, Naira said slowly, what are its goals? Freedom for our people. Justice for what was done at Proxima. And, Thara's eyes gleamed, we've found something. A corporate black site where they're experimenting with Zenithian DNA. We're planning a strike, but we need your expertise. Marcus felt his chest tighten. This was bigger than smuggling or running from corporate patrols. This was war. And what about my current partner? Naira asked, surprising Marcus. He risked everything to free me. I won't abandon that debt. Thara studied Marcus with new interest. The human. He could be useful. If he's willing to join our cause. Marcus met Naira's gaze. In those golden eyes, he saw not just a warrior seeking revenge, but someone who understood the value of loyalty. He thought about all the years he'd spent running, never fighting back against the system that had driven him to the fringes of space. Well, he said, managing a grin, I did say I wanted to change the game. The tension in the cabin eased slightly. Thara ordered her guards to lower their weapons, and for the next hour, they discussed plans. The black site was hidden in the Crimson Nebula, protected by experimental defense systems. But with Naira's knowledge and Marcus's piloting skills, they might have a chance. As Thara prepared to return to her ship, she turned to Naira. Commander, are you certain about this? Trusting a human? Naira's response was immediate. He proved his worth at Port Haven. Now we shall prove ours to him. After Thara left, Marcus and Naira stood in silence, watching the Shadow Dawn disappear back into the asteroid field. Finally, Marcus spoke. You didn't have to stick up for me back there. You could have gone with them, no questions asked. Naira turned to him, her expression solemn. Among my people, there is a saying, honor is not measured in victory, but in the promises we keep. You gave me back my freedom, Marcus Blackwood. Now I choose how to use it. Marcus nodded, understanding the weight of her words. As they set course for the rendezvous point, he realized that their partnership had evolved into something neither of them had expected, trust. The Wanderlust's engines hummed to life, carrying them deeper into a conflict that would test that trust to its limits. The game was indeed changing, and Marcus couldn't help but wonder if they were ready for what came next. Wounds that bind. The Crimson Nebula lived up to its name, swirling with clouds of red gas that made navigation treacherous. The Wanderlust moved cautiously through the cosmic storm, its sensors struggling to penetrate the interference. In the ship's small medical bay, Marcus worked silently, cleaning a plasma burn on Naira's shoulder, a souvenir from their recent reconnaissance mission. The wound is superficial, Naira said, though Marcus noticed her slight wince as he applied the healing gel. We should focus on analyzing the data we retrieved. The data will wait 5 minutes, Marcus replied, continuing his work. Even Zenithian warriors need patching up sometimes. Their scouting of the corporate black site had confirmed Thara's intelligence. The facility was massive, built into an asteroid at the nebula's heart. The security systems were unlike anything Marcus had seen before, suggesting the experiments within were valuable, and likely horrific. As Marcus finished bandaging Naira's shoulder, she caught his wrist. You have a steady hand. Military training? Combat medic, he admitted. Before I went freelance. Served during the frontier wars. Yet you never mentioned this. Her golden eyes studied him intently. Why? Marcus packed away the medical supplies, buying time to order his thoughts. Some memories are better left buried. No, Naira said firmly. Some wounds must be faced if they are to heal. My people believe this. The ship's hull creaked as they passed through a particularly dense section of the nebula. Marcus sighed, settling onto a nearby stool. Last assignment was on Meridian Colony. We were hit by separatist forces. Had to triage hundreds of civilians. His voice grew distant. Sometimes, in this job, you have to choose who lives and who dies. I couldn't do it anymore after that. Naira nodded slowly. At Proxima, I commanded 300 warriors. Only 20 survived the initial assault. I ordered them to retreat while I held the line. Her voice carried centuries of pride and pain. Sometimes leadership means carrying the weight of impossible choices. Their moment of understanding was interrupted by an urgent signal from the Shadow Dawn. Thara's holographic image appeared in the medical bay, her expression grim. "We've intercepted corporate communications," she reported. "They're accelerating the project. Human test subjects are being brought in. We need to move now." Marcus and Naira exchanged looks. Their original plan had called for weeks of preparation, but circumstances were forcing their hand. "How many ships can you gather?" Naira asked, slipping back into her commander's role. "3, including yours. Small enough to slip through their sensor grid, especially in this nebula." "And the defense systems?" Marcus asked. "That's where it gets interesting," Thara replied. "They're using modified Zenithian technology. Commander, they've corrupted our own security protocols to protect their atrocities." Naira's expression hardened. "Then we shall show them the price of such desecration. Send me the data. We attack in 6 hours." After Thara's image faded, Marcus turned to Naira. 6 hours isn't much time to plan an assault." "No," she agreed, rolling her injured shoulder experimentally. "But sometimes the best strategies are born of necessity. Your medical skills may be needed again before this day is done." They spent the next hours preparing, checking weapons, and studying the facility's layout. The plan was audacious: use the nebula's interference to mask their approach, breach the outer defenses using Naira's command codes, and strike at the heart of the facility before reinforcements could arrive. As they made final preparations, Marcus found Naira in the cargo hold, performing what appeared to be a ritual meditation. Her silver scales seemed to pulse with inner light as she moved through a series of fluid combat forms. "It's called the warrior's centering," she explained, sensing his presence. "We believe that before battle, one must make peace with the possibility of death." "Cheerful thought," Marcus said, but he understood the principle. Naira completed her ritual and turned to face him. "You could remain with the ship. This is not your fight." "Maybe not," Marcus replied. "But I've spent too long running from fights that mattered. Besides," he managed a smile, "someone needs to patch you up when this is over." Something softened in Naira's expression. "Then let us hope your medical skills are not tested too severely today." The next hour passed in tense preparation as they rendezvoused with Thara's ships. Looking at their small fleet against the massive facility, Marcus was reminded of something his old combat instructor used to say: "It's not the size of the force that matters, but the conviction of those who wield it." As they took their positions in the Wanderlust's cockpit, Naira spoke softly. "Whatever happens, Marcus Blackwood, know that you have earned a place among my people's warriors." Marcus checked his weapons one last time. "Let's make it count then." The crimson nebula swirled around them, its red clouds seeming to herald the battle to come. 3 ships against a fortress, carrying warriors bound not by species or allegiance, but by shared wounds and a determination to prevent others from suffering the same. The Wanderlust's engines hummed to life, ready to carry them into whatever fate awaited. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the greatest battles were fought not for victory, but for the right to choose how one faces the darkness. The Hunter's Shadow. The attack on the corporate black site had gone both better and worse than expected. Better, because they had successfully breached the facility's defenses and freed the test subjects. Worse, because the intelligence they discovered inside had shaken even Naira's legendary composure. The Wanderlust limped through deep space, its hull bearing fresh scars from their escape. In the ship's small common area, Marcus studied the stolen data files while Naira paced, her usual grace tempered by barely contained fury. "They weren't just experimenting with our DNA," she said, her voice tight. "They were trying to create hybrid soldiers. Mixing Zenithian genetic enhancements with human adaptability. The test subjects." She trailed off, her golden eyes darkening with memory. Most didn't survive the process, Marcus finished grimly, scrolling through the medical logs. But that's not what's really bothering you, is it? Naira stopped pacing, fixing him with an intense stare. They had detailed knowledge of our genetic structure. Knowledge that only our highest council possessed. There is a traitor among my people, Marcus. The ship's proximity alarm suddenly blared to life. Marcus rushed to the cockpit, Naira close behind. A massive vessel had dropped out of hyperspace directly in their path, its design unlike anything Marcus had seen before. Zenithian warship, Naira breathed. Sovereign class. But that's impossible, they were all destroyed at Proxima. The comm system crackled. Commander Valthrax, a deep voice resonated through the cabin. I am Executor Darius Venn. Your rebellion ends here. Naira's scales seemed to pale. Venn, he was head of genetic research before Proxima. We thought him dead. You know him? He was my mentor, Naira's voice was heavy with betrayal. And now I understand everything. He didn't die at Proxima, he deflected. The corporate experiments, the genetic data, he gave them everything. Marcus's hands flew over the controls, calculating escape routes, but the warship's tractor beam had them locked. Options? We can't outrun them, Naira said, her tactical mind racing. But perhaps. She moved to the comm system. Executor Venn. By the old laws, I invoke the right of challenge. Single combat, for the truth of Proxima. Silence stretched for what felt like eternity. Finally, Venn's voice returned. The old laws still bind me, former student. Your challenge is accepted. Prepare for docking. As the Wanderlust was drawn into the massive warship's hangar, Marcus grabbed Naira's arm. This is suicide. He'll have the whole ship's crew backing him. No, Naira said with certainty. The right of challenge is sacred. Even a traitor like Venn won't violate it. But Marcus. She hesitated. If I fall, the data we stole must reach the resistance. Promise me. Marcus met her gaze. You're not falling today. But I promise. The hangar was vast, clearly designed for military operations. Executor Venn waited in its center, his massive frame encased in ceremonial combat armor. Dozens of Zenithian warriors lined the walls, their expressions unreadable. Venn's smile was cold as they approached. My brightest student. You always did have a flair for the dramatic. Why? Naira's voice carried across the hangar. Why betray everything we stood for? Evolution demands sacrifice, Venn spread his arms. Our people stagnated, clinging to outdated principles. The humans, for all their flaws, understand adaptation. Together, we could create something greater. At what cost? Naira's voice rose. How many died in your experiments? How many more would die in your quest for evolution? Progress requires sacrifice, Venn's voice hardened. Something you never understood. Shall we begin? The combat that followed was unlike anything Marcus had ever witnessed. Both warriors moved with superhuman speed and precision, their enhanced bodies pushing the limits of physical possibility. But where Venn's style was brutal and efficient, Naira fought with an almost artistic grace. The duel seemed evenly matched until Venn landed a crushing blow to Naira's injured shoulder. She stumbled, and he pressed his advantage. You've grown soft, he taunted. Consorting with humans has weakened you. Naira's response was unexpected, she laughed. No, teacher. They've shown me something you've forgotten. She rolled away from his next strike, her movements changing. The strength of adaptation. What followed was a display of combat that combined Zenithian power with human unpredictability. Naira moved in ways that seemed to confound Venn's expectations, using techniques Marcus recognized from street fighting in guerrilla warfare. The end came swiftly. Then, frustrated by his inability to predict her movements, overextended. Naira slipped past his guard and struck with lethal precision. The executor fell, his enhanced body finally failing him. The hangar remained silent as Naira stood over her fallen mentor. "Your evolution ends here," she said softly. Then, raising her voice to address the watching warriors, "You've seen the truth. Will you continue to follow a path of dishonor?" One by one, the Zenithian warriors knelt, acknowledging her victory and the justice of her cause. As Marcus watched, he realized that something momentous had just occurred, not just a duel, but a turning point in the relationship between their species. Warriors reborn. The aftermath of Ven's defeat rippled through both human and Zenithian space like a shockwave. The massive warship, now under Naira's command, became the flagship of a growing resistance movement. The Wanderlust flew alongside it, a small but significant symbol of the alliance being forged. In the warship's command center, Marcus watched Naira address a gathered council of both human and Zenithian leaders. Her silver scales gleamed under the harsh lights, but it was her presence that commanded attention. The corporate experiments weren't just an atrocity, she declared, projecting the stolen data. They were a wake-up call. For too long, both our peoples have lived in isolation, fear, or conflict. But together. She gestured to Marcus. Together, we are stronger. The evidence they'd gathered from the black site had exposed corporate corruption at the highest levels. Public outrage led to mass resignations and reforms. More importantly, it opened dialogue between humans and Zenithians that had seemed impossible before. "The real work begins now," Naira said privately to Marcus later, as they stood in the Wanderlust's cockpit. The ship, though small compared to the warship, remained their preferred command post. Changing hearts and minds is harder than winning battles. Marcus nodded, studying the stars through the viewport. "Funny how things work out. I started this trying to save one warrior, and ended up helping reshape the future of two species. Do you regret it?" Naira asked, her golden eyes searching his face. "Not for a moment," he replied honestly. "Though I miss the simple life of smuggling sometimes." Their conversation was interrupted by Thuraw's arrival. "Commander, the first joint training sessions are ready to begin. We have 20 human pilots eager to learn Zenithian combat techniques. And how many Zenithian warriors willing to learn human adaptability?" Naira asked. 30, Thuraw smiled. "Your victory over Ven made quite an impression." As they worked to integrate their forces, Marcus noticed subtle changes in both groups. Humans began adopting aspects of Zenithian discipline and honor, while Zenithian warriors learned to appreciate human creativity and flexibility. It wasn't always smooth, centuries of prejudice and misunderstanding didn't vanish overnight, but it was progress. "You know," Marcus said one evening, as he and Naira shared a quiet moment in the Wanderlust's observation deck, "when I first met you, I thought I was just doing the right thing. I never imagined it would lead to all this." Naira turned to him, her expression softening. "Sometimes the greatest journeys begin with the smallest steps. My people have a saying, the stars guide our path, but our choices shape our destiny." The future stretched before them, full of challenges but also possibilities. The Wanderlust and its crew had become a symbol of what could be achieved when different species worked together, their strengths complementing rather than opposing each other. "So," Marcus asked, a familiar grin spreading across his face, "ready for another adventure?" Naira's answering smile held both warriors' pride and genuine warmth. "With you, Marcus Blackwood. Always." The Wanderlust's engines hummed to life, carrying them toward whatever destiny awaited. Behind them, human and Zenithian ships flew in formation, a fleet united not by fear or dominance, but by choice and mutual respect. In the end, it wasn't just about rescuing a warrior or redefining a path. It was about showing that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from standing alone, but from standing together. As they jumped to hyperspace, Marcus reflected that maybe this was what both their species had been searching for all along, not victory over each other, but the victory of finding common ground among the stars. The story of the human who rescued a warrior had become something much larger, a tale of two civilizations learning that their differences could be their greatest asset, and that true evolution came not from force, but from understanding. As the Wanderlust disappeared into hyperspace, it left behind a legacy that would reshape the galaxy, one small act of kindness at a time.